dive in here. We are in part two, night two of the blog project, right? One of the projects that never dies. We keep on coming back to it. We've done front ends in, I think, vanilla JavaScript. We started doing routing in our React project. We are now working our ways up into replacing the local storage with actually using our database, our backend, all of that good stuff. Before we dive in tonight, does anyone have any outstanding questions about the blog project or really anything in general? Okay, let's go ahead and dive on in then. I am headed to my code. I am headed to my week 18. I am headed into my day 3. I am going to go to my blog front end and delete out my node modules. I'm going to go to my blog backend and delete out my node modules. I'm going up to the week 18 day 3 folder and I am right clicking and duplicating on that. I am renaming that to day 4. I'm popping my front end into VS Code. I'm popping my back end into VS Code. I am opening the terminal on both of them and npm installing. And once you are done with the npm install, we can npm start. Remember, good idea to start your backend first. Make sure you are connected to the database. Make sure you have no problems there. Once you are, you can switch back over to the blog front end and npm start over there. That should fire up where we left off with our localhost 3000. And live share links are coming your way. Live share links are out and in chat. All standard project setup we've done so far. Getting our day set up from our last night's code. Week 18, day 3 is moving into week 18, day 4. Installing our node modules, npm starting on both of them. Reminder to start the back end before the front end. Or the back end or the front end may give you an error. I will just give you a preview. If you do start the front end before the back end, you will get this error that says failed to fetch. There's nothing wrong here. It's just your front end is trying to get to the back end and the back end hasn't been started yet. So if you ever get a failed to fetch at any point in your project, starting up or otherwise, always a good idea to go over to your back end, check the terminal there, see if there are any errors. If there aren't any errors, also make sure that it is running. So we will fire that back up. And then once you do fire it back up, this error will not magically go away. We do need to remember to refresh, and that will take care of the problem. Okay, so where did we leave off last night? We got our new post button working, and we can prove that because we can add in some new title and amazing content. We can hit the create post button, and we do get to see that showing up. Now, in case we need to do any debugging tonight, which we will at some point, we can pop open Beekeeper Studio, connect to the local DB, pop open our top left and go down to the blog, not messages. And over in our post table, we can see that new content that we created, including the timestamps updated and rocking and rolling. So we're in a pretty good place to keep on going here. We picking up where we left off, I've got this read more button, but when I click on it, I get this read undefined. So the first thing that I want to do is figure out where that read more button is in our front end code. So I'm going to start up at app. App takes me to the home component. So I pop open the home component, and inside of that, we go down to our posts in state, now getting loaded in from the database. That's cool. But that is returning out post preview. So I'm going to command click on my post preview. That brings me down all the way through here. We got our timestamp, we've got our content showing up, but we've got this link tag here. The link should still be there, right? We're still entering in the front end, but we want to get to what page? We want to get to this read page. But we don't want to do it with timestamp anymore because hypothetically, the timestamp could be the exact same on two different posts. We use the timestamp as kind of a placeholder until we dealt with until we got a database ID. Now that we have a database ID, we can work with that. So we are going to change our post details here to use the post details.id. Then we're going to go back to our home page. And if we hover over the read more button, you see down in the bottom left in Chrome, really tiny, it says /message /red/2. That is telling us the ID is actually working. So we do have to go back to the home page. Once we get back on the home page, if we click the read more button, we still get loading. But we should no longer have undefined in the URL. If we don't have undefined in the URL, we are good to move on to the next step. Before we forget, in app.js, we should tell it we're no longer expecting the timestamp to go in there. So we're going to update that to ID. Once we have the ID updated in app.js, and once in our post preview, we use the ID instead of timestamp, we can move into the read post component. In the read post component, we are no longer going to get the timestamp out from the params. Instead, we're going to get the ID out from the params. Then we've got this thing called get individual post. What is that doing? That is in a function called lib that is getting the individual post. But we need to modify this a little bit. This individual post is coming from local storage. We want no traces of local storage left by the time we are done with this. So I'm going to delete everything out and get individual post and rewrite that to use the backend. So I'm going to say const res is equal to an await. And because I'm using await, I need to modify this to be async. And I'm going to find that post not based off of the timestamp anymore. I'm going to find that post based off of the ID. So I throw my ID in there. I say const res equals await my fetch to my localhost 3001. Make sure to spell localhost right. And I'm like, okay, where do I want to go to get that in my backend? Well, I do have an endpoint in my index.js to get all of my posts, but I don't have an endpoint to get one specific post. So we are going to follow a convention here. We are going to say server.get, and we're going to get an individual post, but we're going to use that route param to get the ID out of what post we are trying to get. We are going to async our recres, and we are going to res.send back the post by awaiting our post.findBy PK. PK is short for primary ID. We could say post.findOne where the ID is this thing, but this is a little shortcut. This is built into SQLi saying, hey, we look things up by their primary key so frequently, it is okay to take the shortcut. What ID do we want to look it up by? We're going to look it up by the rec.params.id. A couple of you guys joining late. I just reposted the live share links in the chat if you need them. Okay, we got our server.get set up. Now let's go use that on the front end. So I'm going to go back over to the back end. I'm going to say, go get an individual post. And what post do I want to get? I want to get it based off of the ID that is passed in as this parameter up here. Then I'm going to get my data by awaiting a res.json. And I am going to return the data dot post, making sure that my post here lines up with my post over here. Give you guys a second on that, making sure your index.js is up to date with the server.get over here and the get individual post over here. Okay, once you have all of that in, we don't have a way to test this yet. And that's what we really need to work our way up to. So if we go back over to read post, we have the get individual post. We're calling it right here. We need to give it the ID instead of the timestamp. Then, in theory, all of this should work. So I'm going to save, and I get an error that timestamp is not defined on 35 and 66. So I need to fix that apparently. 35 is down here. That's working with the delete post. We're going to have to make the delete post work entirely different. So I'm going to come over here and delete out all of the local storage stuff. I also have another problem on 54 that it's trying to use the timestamp to link to the edit button. No more timestamps. We are using the ID instead. So I changed that to ID. Now I should be able to go to the browser and everything is horribly wrong. Okay, saying by invalid date, none of my content is here. Something's obviously not right. So I am going to go to my matching post and I'm just going to console log out my matching post and see what's coming out. And what I'm getting is a promise. I'm like, promises are doing me no good. I need the actual content of that post. So what I need to do is move this all into a function that is async called get post, which is going to say the matching post is awaiting the get individual post using the ID and then setting that into state and calling get post. And finally, we see A and B showing up here. I know that was a lot of steps. I'm going to try and give you guys a run through of that. I was trying to get us to the point where we had an output that we could test against. Didn't realize it would be so many steps to get us there. So let's run back through this. Up in post preview, we changed the read to the ID. The overarching goal of all of this here is that we are trying to change out all of our timestamps for our IDs. So up in post preview, we changed the link to an ID. Then in read post, we change our timestamp to an ID up in the use params. We go into the use effect and clear everything out. Then in our use effect, we we make this function called get post, which is asynchronous, so that we can await that keyword. Then we get the results of that, set it into state, and call get post. We scroll down and we clear out most of what is in our delete post because we got to rewrite that to make sure that the delete post is working. Pausing there. Has a second to let that soak in. Sure, you want to share screen? Um, an error. Oh, yeah, an error. That usually means your backend is not running. So yep, so you've got an app crash down at the bottom. And if I request remote, invalid input type for type integer. Oh, okay. So it's trying to tell you, it's trying to find based off an ID, but the ID is undefined. So that usually means that this ID was not specified, so this is failing. So we have to go find where this call is getting made. That call is getting made in our get individual post by the ID. Okay, well, let's see if it is sending in the ID properly here. So if we console log the ID and go back, and we do have to restart your backend server. Okay, so that's restarted. We go back here, we refresh, everything's happy. We go to read more. It crashes again, but if we look inside the console, we have undefined in read post. So now we know it's not actually a backend problem. There's something going on the front end. So let's go back to the front end. Where is ID supposed to come from? It's supposed to come from params. Where do we specify the params? We specify the params right here and tell it is no longer a timestamp. It's an ID we are expecting. Don't forget to reboot your backend. Go back to your front end, refresh, and you're good to go. I will be disappointed in y'all if there are no more than 2 people that also need help, because that was a lot of steps. End result that we're going for is seeing A and B invalidate and the by being wrong. We'll fix that in a second, but you should be able to go to another post, pop that open, and see the title and the content for that as well. Everyone else good? Everyone got that working? We need another minute. So the flow is app, home, links to post preview. Post preview links to read with the ID. That brings us back up to app. App has the route or the path called read that is told the ID will be part of it. The ID that is now part of it goes into read post. Read post pulls the ID out from the params coming from the router. We then go into use effect and do a get post that is asynchronous. Get post calls get individual post and passes in the ID. The ID then goes into get individual post and sends that ID to the post endpoint. The post endpoint then gets that ID from the params and sends it into the database. The database then returns our post in post. We then take that post out of the data and returned it into get individual post. Get individual post stores that in matching post. Matching post gets set into state. The state updates post in state, and post in state comes down here and uses the title and the content. And while we're at it, the last thing we can do, we can update our post in state to use updated at instead of the timestamp. And that should fix our invalid date problem right there. So that last one, line 46 for me with the to locale string, just switch that out to updated at. Okay, anyone have questions? Anyone need help? Anyone need another minute? This is a really important flow because if you have anything on your site where you're going to show a list of everything or a summary of everything and make it so they can click on that thing to learn more about it, this is the exact flow you will be using, right? Hey, I'm going to show just the name and just the ID of something in a link. And when they click on that link in my capstone, I'm going to go to another page that shows them all of the details about that in the database. This is the exact flow you will be using for that. It requires routing on the front end. It requires understanding route parameters on the router on the front end. It requires you to understand routing parameters on the back end. It requires you to understand how we make API calls, how we set that data into state, how we generate a link based off of that ID. It requires us to understand state of building the data into state so we can extract that information and show it out. It requires understanding of .map, of how do we loop over everything in the database and generate out a new thing that will include the link to get more details to it. There's really a lot going on here. So take a minute, let that soak in, see if you have any questions before we go get the author up and running.
Actually, Max, I have a slightly older problem than that. Can I share my screen real quick?
You sure can. I'm actually going to try not stopping sharing my screen and seeing if I can actually see yours. Nope, I can't. Okay. You're good. Okay, cannot resolve lib get individual posts in source. Okay. Um so get individual posts. Get individual posts is exported and it's cranky in edit post. Get individual post.
I think it
To
might be plural. I just saw that.
get individual.
I think I named the JavaScript. Yeah. Wow.
Singular oh, get individual posts is the file name. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can just throw an S on it here. And also in
Read posts.
read post. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And then when you log in, those credentials will be right here. So you can log in with those and then try and create a post, and that will let you test everything out.
Okay.
You're about to make user authentication much more secure than being able to open a JavaScript file and see the username and password directly in it. Everyone good? All right, I am going to... Don't know that I have reference code for bcrypt, so we're just going to do that off the fly. Okay. So we've got this working. We got to do the edit flow and the delete flows in a second. We'll take care of those later, right? Because those are kind of more of the same thing. They're boring. Maybe we'll do them after break. But what I want to get into is the more fun part of user authentication, knowing who is signed in, and then also being able to know who wrote that post. So what we are going to do is we are going to go back up to the home page and we are going to log out.
Not sharing your screen.
Thank you. So we are going to go back to the home page, hit the log out button on the home page. We should be logged out. We are good to go there. This, again, is not the most secure way of handling user authentication. You're going to learn that on Tuesday and Wednesday from Ryan. He's going to come in, teach you guys about Clerk, show you a more automated workflow for all of this, much better way of doing this. But I do think there is value in teaching you kind of the manual way of semi-securely handling login through an entire full stack workflow. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to the login page. So go ahead and click on login, and I see my username and my password here. So I'm going to close out of everything on the front end, because something that you will learn is as you are working in all these different files, it's super easy to get lost in them, right? So whenever you are saying, check that off the list, cross that off, I've got that done, it is a good idea to reset mentally, just clean out any extra tabs that you have open. So I close out everything on the back end, and I'm going to pop in login.js. And in my login.js, I've got this logic here that isn't great, because all I'm doing is checking to see if the username is max and the password is secret. Obviously not great, because at any point someone could go in to your inspect and click into, is it sources? I forget where it is. Page. There is a way in here to figure out okay. So I went in, you don't have to follow this, but just trying to prove a point. If you go into sources, static JS bundle, I did a command F search for password, and there is all the way down on line 620. This bundle.js is basically taking all the JavaScript that we have across all the different files and bundling it up into one file that the browser can run more easily. So in there, I hit Command F and I just searched for password. And what did I eventually get to? I got to the exact password we're trying to compare it to. Not the most secure way about going about a password. So the more secure way about going about a password is storing that password in the backend. We then tell the backend, hey, you're going to get a request from the front end. You're going to authenticate the front end information with the back end information. And if there is a match, send it back to the front end. You're logged in, you're good to go. But if there is not a match, then show the error message. What's the benefit of that? Well, because the backend and the database are secure, there's no way for a end user to view our backend code or even access the database directly unless they're using an API for it. So there's no way for them to go to the users table and go get all of the information in the users table unless we go out of our way to create a user endpoint that is retrieving all of that information. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to go into Beekeeper, and I'm looking at my users table, and I'm like, there's nothing in here. Now, I could hit the plus button and set up a user account for me, but I don't want to have to do that every single time I start up the server. What happens if I want to create multiple users? What happens when this database accidentally gets deleted? And when my server starts, I want it to just create a user by default. Well, we're getting into a concept here called database seeding, seeding. And in fact, that will be our attendance word of the night. So go do attendance. The secret word is seeding, seeding. And seeding, just like planting a plant seed outside, the idea of it is to load in the starter information for the database. What does the database start out with? What information, what rows? So the database has enough information to get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down below our server.listen. And we are going to throw in here, hey, const check for existing user. And we are going to say, oh, wait. Well, let me do this. Where the user, and make sure your auto import is coming from your db.js file. User.find1 where the email is maxm@hackupstate.com. I save. I make sure my email is in curly braces. And now doesn't look like anything happened there. And if I console log my check for existing user, I get null. But that's what we would expect, right? The database does not have an email for maxm@hackupstate.com. So what I want to do is say if there is not an existing user, then await a user.create with an email of maxm@hackupstate.com, a password as not so secure. We're going to fix that in a second. A first name of Max, last name of Matthews, and looks like I got everything that I needed. So I save that. I come over to the database. I hit the refresh button. And now I have my email, my last name, my password, and my first name saved into the database. And what's kind of cool is if I stop my backend server and hit up enter on it, all of a sudden, I no longer, after my connected to DB comes out, my user is pulling out all of my information. Because this user already exists, this code is smart enough to say, oh, there is an existing user, so don't bother creating a new one. We already found that default user account that exists in the system. So because of that, I can delete out my check for existing user console.log, and now I have created my first initial user. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh and we're good to go. We see the data in the database and we see that we have seeded our very first user. I will come back to making this password more secure, but I want to get through the whole login flow first. And once we are able to do that, I'll show you guys how to do password hashing. And hashing is a specific type of encryption. So end result here is you should be able to go to Beekeeper, pop open your users table, and see your user has been created. And attendance, the secret word is seeding, seeding. Tiffany.
Get error for that.
Go ahead, share screen. Could be something wrong with your model, but we will check and find out. Wait. You are missing the import for your user. So up here, just throw in a comma user. Capital U, and don't forget the comma after the post. And save. And that is all good. And then just refresh in Beekeeper and make sure you can see that row.
Thanks.
And obviously don't actually use like your real password in case I have to screen share with you for everyone. We have not secured those passwords yet.
I'm having a similar issue. However, my import user is where it should be.
Okay, share screen. Make sure in your db.js, you've got your user exported at the bottom.
There?
I do, but that's my code. See, I've fallen for that trick so many times, I learned my lesson. I swear my code is working. I don't know what's wrong with yours. Oh, wait.
Brain's a little smooth today.
Happens to the best of us.
And then just
Don't forget to
restart.
save your, yep, there you go. And then it should be in Beekeeper if you refresh. Good to go.
I'm not seeing it in there.
All right, let me.
However, I'm getting null.
You'll get null the first time. It's just after you run it for the second time, it will be something other than null. So yeah, all of that looks fine. So let's stop it and restart it. Is your... we got to be consistent with email here. Oh,
I made a little an oopsie there. You can just take off
yeah.
the first part of it.
And if you would prefer your email to not be part of the YouTube recording, make sure you change that. Okay, now it looks like it should be there. Go ahead and check your database. You may have a couple extra rows. Feel free to delete them as well. No?
Well, oh, there we go. I was like, why is this not letting me pull it in? Yeah, nothing.
How about this refresh? So this
Oh.
refresh button down here for table data. And then I'm just going to nuke these two while we're here to prevent any issues. Okay, you're good to go. Anyone else need help? Okay. So on to the next step. We've got our user created. We've got the database seeded with the first round of data. So now we have to basically write an endpoint to check to make sure the information that the user is submitting lines up with an actual user account. So I'm going to go back above my server.listen, and I'm going to make a server.post to log in. And it will be an async request. And inside of there, we are going to say const matching user equals await user dot find one where the email address lines up with the rec.body.email. And if there is not a matching user, res.send a message, let's say error, true message, no account found with that email address. Else, if the matching user dot password does not equal the rec.body.password, res.send error true message wrong password, no soup for you. Else, there must be a matching user and their password must be correct. So res.send error false. And let's go ahead and send back their user ID as the matching user. No way to test all of this until we get over to the front end. Good chunk of code there, but hopefully the logic is pretty self-explanatory. Anyone need one more minute? Okay. Go make this all work on the front end. When my login form is submitted, this logic is nice and sweet and simple, but we obviously need a little bit more than that to make it work on the front end. So I am going to integrate with the back end. So I'm going to just move my redirect out. And I'm also going to move my window local storage command out as comments, just so I have them saved. And then I'm going to go ahead and get to work on my backend login code. So I'm going to say const res equals await. Because I'm doing an await, I need an async. I'm going to do a fetch to my localhost 3001 login. It is going to use a method of post. It is going to use headers of a content type of application JSON. It is going to send in a body that is a JSON stringify of. And I need to be careful here because my database is expecting an email to be sent in. But when we first designed our login page, we used username and password. So I'm going to map this and I'm going to say email is going to come from the username on the front end, but the password is automatically going to line up with the password coming from state. Then I am going to say await const data equals await our res.json. And if there is an error, if there is a error in the data, set the error message to the data.message. Else, redirect them to the new post page, set logged in as yes, and we're going to do one other thing with local storage. We're going to set the user ID to the data.user ID. Go through the expected output in a second, but that is a lot of code. And I wanted to challenge myself tonight. I am going completely off book. So we will see, well, completely, yeah, off book, I guess is a good phrase. I'm not using any reference code tonight. So if any of this seems a little weird, seems a little funky, you have any questions about it, as always, you know, you are encouraged to ask them. All right, let's test this sucker out. So what we are going to do is we're going to pop open Chrome. We're going to open our login. We're going to type in blah and blah and hit login. And it says no account found with that email address. That's cool. That's flowing through our authentication. Again, this is not the most secure login screen. There are actually security implications of giving an error message that the account exists, but you got the password wrong, as opposed to just invalid login credentials, period. But anyway, this gets the full stack flowing, I think, a little bit better. So that's why we're covering it this way. All right. Username, I will actually do maxm@hackupstate.com. I will get the password wrong, and I get my no password. Always good to test your authentication. Make sure that you didn't do an exclamation point in the wrong spot. Once you have that up and running, we can say, hey, let's sign in with our actual password. And our actual password that we created was not so secure down in our backend seed. So I'm going to type in not so secure. I'm going to hit the login button. And nothing works. Oh, in my backend code, I apparently like my body too much. I said rec.body.body. My bad. This should be rec.body.password. So if you throw in rec.body.password in your backend code, let's try this login again. So I'm going to click login, and it should take me over to the new post page. Okay, pausing there for any questions you may have. Okay, well, now that we know that the user is logged in and we're storing that information in user ID, again, not the most secure way about going about this. you guys will learn about middleware and server side ways of authenticating the user to make sure that they can't spoof themselves as another user. JWT tokens and all kinds of fun stuff coming down the pipeline. But for now, we're going to kind of use this user ID to our advantage. So in our new post, we're going to go down and say, instead of just sending in the title and the content when we create our post using the backend posts method, we are also going to include the okay, got another problem. I also want to send in the author information, but the author information isn't in our post model yet. So we're going to come in and add in our author ID, go into our data types and store that as an integer. I save. I come back over to my back or to my front end. And in my front end, I'm going to add in my author ID, which is going to come from my window local storage get item user ID. So it lines up with what I set over here. This will not work on the first try, but I want to go through the debugging steps so we can see when something breaks in the full stack flow, what is every piece we need to test in order to know where it is breaking. So first thing, we got to make sure it's broken. I come over here, I say my third post, I say amazing content. I hit create post and I get a failed to fetch immediately. Okay, well, I've got my author ID added here. I've got my author ID added here. And over in the back end, I get this long error message. And it's telling me the SQL that it's trying to run. And I'm going to go up a little bit more. And it says error column R author ID of relation posts does not exist. Okay. Well, I'm in my post and I told it that the author ID is an integer. So I'm going to go over to my beekeeper. I'm going to push every refresh button that I can find, all three of them. And I'm going to pop open my posts, not my messages, my posts. And I don't have an author ID in here. Does anyone want to take a guess as to why?
What table are you in?
Posts.
And what's the question?
Why don't I have an author ID inside my posts table?
Didn't you use like the user ID?
I could use the user ID, but the problem is that the author ID or the user ID isn't showing up here. The problem actually ends up being in db.js. You know, when we called this magical function called sync, this only works in one direction. It will not update existing tables for us because it doesn't want to override and cause any data loss. So there are two additional options that we can pull on to sync. Sync by default will only create tables if they don't exist. There is a option called force true, which will go nuclear in your database, and it will just delete any table where the table structure does not match. There is a new command that I learned thanks to Joe asking questions that were somewhat rabbit holes and are now looping all the way back to actual class content. We can come in here and we can say alter true. And if we save that, looks like the server is happy. And if we refresh over here, you will now see we have an author ID hanging out in our post table. Now, I wouldn't want to leave that alter true command on, because as we're going, we may be developing models, we may not be done with the models, we may be moving columns around. We don't want to like leave that alter true on all the time, because we don't want to accidentally be updating our table schemas unintentionally. So we're going to take this alter true and we're just going to leave it hanging out over here. And that way, if we ever do need it, we remember exactly what that command is. We can throw it in. But now we are storing our author ID. So I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back to the front end. I'm going to refresh my new post. I'm going to say a post with an author and some great content. I'm going to hit the create post button, and I still get a fail to fetch, and now I don't actually know why it's doing that. Invalid input type for integer object. Ah, okay, my bad. Instead of sending back the entire matching user in our index.js under login, we need to send back the matching user's ID and only their ID. We don't want to send back the entire user. We want to send back just their ID. So I'm going to save. I'm going to go back to the home page. I'm going to log out. I'm going to log back in. That's going to reset everything. That's going to clear us out. I'm going to sign in with Max at hackupstate.com and not so secret. I'm going to not so secret. Apparently that's not my password. Not so secure. Not so secure. And say please work. We hit create post. Okay. Doesn't show the person's name yet. We got to do more work for that. But if we take a look over in our beekeeper, we can refresh on the post table and now see my author ID is 1.
I'm still getting that fetch error. Where else did you change the matching user to include the ID?
In the index.js under login, make sure that you've got a .id here.
And then what
And
else?
then in the front end, log out, log back in to re-trigger that entire flow, and then try and create a new post.
Well,
And the end result should be in your beekeeper refresh, scroll all the way to the right, and you should be able to see the author ID. Everyone good? Everyone get an ID in their database?
still failing to fetch for me.
Go ahead, share your screen.
No, now I'm logged in. Ah, Visual Studio Code. I do hate these so. Nope.
Okay, failed to fetch. Let me go to to your
Oh, sorry.
okay, there we go. crashing because it's still getting the object to object. So we're gonna go up to login. You are now sending the ID, so that's good. So we're gonna go, oh, well, now we can't get to your logout button, can we?
I can just restart the front end.
Let's restart actually the back end. And then refresh. Now we can log out, log back in. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know if I ever commented at alter true. Not that it really matters if we didn't touch anything else yet, but
Yeah, that shouldn't cause a problem. Okay, now create your post. And check in your beekeeper and make sure you have your user ID set.
just the right one.
Where did you not modify your, oh, there you go. Good work. Tiffany, you need help? Okay, failed to fetch. So I'm gonna start with remote control. And I'm gonna stop your server and restart it. Just oop. What's up with your, oh, is it working now? What's up with your keyboard shortcuts not working in Dash?
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay, that's working. It is failing on author ID probably. So let's go db.js. We're gonna put in, you had alert true, not alter true.
Oh,
And that's what did it. So let me throw that back in. That will modify our table, and then we will take that back out to prevent it from causing issues down the road. Save, refresh, no crash. Create. And if we go to Beekeeper and open posts and refresh. Oh, almost. We were close. Author ID is still null. So let's make sure in our front end, in login, user ID right there. Okay, try that again. Login. Did you use mine?
yep.
Okay. Not so, I can never remember. Not so secure. Oh, come on. Not so secure. There we go. Back to Beekeeper. Refresh. And you're good to go.
Thanks.
Terry?
Yeah, I keep getting a wrong password, even though I'm definitely typing like the right password. So,
Okay. So let's check. There are two things I want to look at. I'm gonna request remote, and I'm gonna start in your Beekeeper.
oh, I got
Because
it. It's on my other screen. Let me just-
okay, go for it. I want to check your users table first. And your email's here, so that's good. Your login is using the email. And res sending everything back fine. I don't see any problems there. So let's go look at your login. Your login is pulling username, password. Interesting. You're in Chrome. There we go. Okay, no problems there. And see, what happened was your user account already got created with a different password. Then, because that account already got created, it wasn't updating the password because there was already an account there. So if we take this and set your password to what you wanted it to be, and remember to hit apply, now when we try and log in, oh, come on, I thought that was going to do it. You know what, just to be safe, I'm just going to delete this whole row. And then I'm going to go to your backend and restart it. And then I'm going to refresh. Okay. Then I'm going to take this, copy and paste it. And then I'm going to take this and copy and paste it. Oh. Stringify, email, username, password. What is going on? Network, login, payload, email, password. Well, you know, this may be annoying for everyone, but it does give you a good flow of debugging. No. Console log, the rec.body, and also the matching user. Find one where email rec res. I don't think we have to refresh in the browser because it is finding the user and it is sending in the right email and password. So let's check your logic flow. There's not a matching user, send an error. Else if the matching password, oh, right here, that was a typo that I had. Sorry, I should have found that way quicker. In my code, I fixed that typo like 10 minutes after I realized that that was the problem. Now that we're actually looking for your password, you're good to go. Sorry about that. Invalidate on homepage, but not the edit page. We fixed that at some point in our post preview.js. It should be pulling in updated at here. If yours is pulling in updated at and still showing invalid date, we can fix it.
Sharing my screen.
And Terry, I'll come back to you next. Okay, lowercase u for updated at. Your cat got not only the U key, but the shift key at the same time. That's really impressive.
She's got big feet. Okay. She's a big cat. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Terry, you're back up. Okay, you got a failed to fetch. Let me request remote again.
I was trying to debug on my own. I tried.
No, this is all part of it. Okay, so missing column. which means we need to go to, actually, hold on. This async needs to be out here. And then this, we need to do our alter true again to get it to create the column for us. And now that it's there, we can take that out and refresh over here. And A, B, C, D, E, F, create posts. Well, that's interesting. What's it thinking about? Get posts. Do we need a lowercase p here? Or are you using uppercase in your front end? I don't, what? Network. Scoot this up so it's not hanging off. Close this console. We've angered the front end gods. The back end gods are easy to tick off, but the front end gods, that's different. Home. Posts. Okay, it is lowercase p. So lowercase p here. Fetch 2000 posts. Is it even make API call? It was not called. Aha! Now you're good to go. All right, anyone else want to test my debugging skills? I feel like
Sure.
I'm not quite at the normal level I am, but you know, we're getting through.
I am also on a failed to fetch.
All right, share screen. Some of these are just like the order that you reboot, and then some of them are like, you know, legit issues. So let me request remote. And whenever I get a failed to fetch, I always like to start in the backend terminal. And we've got a problem on invalid input type integer for undefined. Trying to get the post ID. So let's trace that through. You were on the read page when you got the failed to fetch. Okay, so we start up in app.js. We tell app.js, hey, we're no longer using timestamps anymore. We're using IDs. That then goes to ID here. ID here goes down to the ID here, get individual post here, passes the ID, passes the post back out. We await, we set. Okay. That all looks fine. So we're going to restart the back end. Now that we've fixed the issue, hopefully on the front end, refresh here, and you're good to go. All right. Anyone else need help? Joe made a comment. I think I need to do a mini project that takes one aspect from this project and practice with that. There's a lot of code to go through here. Absolutely. Yeah. This is meant to be the I want to call it the Rolls Royce of full stack projects, but we're trying to cover all the different concepts here so that when you get to your capstone, you can go, oh, I need a read more button to work, or oh, I need a form that saves something to the database, or oh, I need to do something relationally, which is what we're about to dive into next. Sorry, you're not getting an '03 Mitsubishi event of anything from me. But all right, let's do one more section and then we will go on break. So we've done all of this work to get our author ID showing up as 1 here. But when we're looking at the data that's coming back, when we are getting our posts up in home, if I console log out the data.posts here, I can see that I'm getting the ID, the content, the created at, but what I am not getting, Terry, I'll come back to you after break to fix that. The author ID is 1. And I'm like, okay, so what? What does that mean? Well, we know in the database, right, that 1 lines up to my users table with an ID of 1, and that user's name is Max Matthews. Well, that's what I want to display here. When I show by, I don't want to show by author ID 1. I want to show the person's name. Well, in SQL, we would do a join on that, right? We would say join the users.id equal to the post.author ID, and we'd be able to get back the columns from either one of them. Well, we can do that in SQLize pretty easily. What we're going to do is head back into our code, and it will be a miracle if I can get this to work on the first time. I'm going to say, after my post model, no, I'm going to do it in db.js. I changed my mind. In db.js, after we connect to the database, I am going to say that oh God, help me. Going to say that the post model belongs to the user model, where the foreign key is author ID. And don't misspell foreign like I just did. Still looks like I spelled it wrong. Foreign key. Okay. So I'm going to save that. Post model is not. Okay, is it this? Okay, sorry. Where the post belongs to a specific user. And then we have to tell SQLize, well, where do those two overlap? It will assume it overlaps at the ID over on the user side. But we do need to specify the foreign key in the post table is called author ID. Okay. We save that. You should have no errors in your database, in your terminal. We're going to go back to our index.js. And in our get of all of the posts, we're going to modify our find all and tell it to include the user. So only 2 new lines here. In db.js, we tell the post belongs to a user, and we specify the foreign key. Then over in index.js, I tell it, hey, when you're finding the post, go include the user information with it. I save. I come over here. I refresh and check that sucker out. In addition to my author ID, I now have my user information. I'm like, whoa, that's really cool. But I got kind of a problem here. I just leaked the password of that user out. So anyone who's looking at my network is able to see that I wrote a post and now can see my password. Oopsie, maybe not the best thing to do. So we can fix that by by wow, there is a lot of documentation here. So I am going off the sequelized documentation. Usual finder methods, get tasks, choose what attributes through and just to remind you what tools are available for your use, you can include and modify it to include the specific attributes. So we're going to do that. We're going to come over here, and instead of just passing an array, we're going to pass the model and say the attributes, the only attributes that we care about are, let's say, the ID, their first name, and their last name. And if that works, when we refresh in our browser, we still get the user, but now we only get the 3 pieces of information that we care about. So whenever you are doing an include on the users table, which is a very common thing to do, make sure you don't accidentally leak that user's email and password by including all of the default, which is what all the default columns, which is what Sequelize will do. So if you ever are pulling in that user information, make sure you've got your attributes set here to make sure that the password and even maybe even their username or email isn't leaking through your data. So we haven't done anything with it yet, but in your front end, if you pop open a post that does have an author ID, you should see the user, and in that user, you should be able to see their first name and their last name. If that all worked for you, kudos, awesome job. If it didn't work for you, we will circle back and start with debugging after the break. Terry, raise your hand if you don't mind so I can remember to start with you. And then we will loop through anyone else who needs the help. I'll leave my screen share on this, and we will go from there after break. See you guys at 7:25. Recording. And Terry, did you fix it? Okay, go ahead, share the screen.
Am I not
Oh,
there?
sorry, I'm still sharing mine.
Oh.
There we go. All right. I'm going to request remote. I'm going to start in the front end with in your new post right here, we need to send in the author ID, which is going to come from local storage, get item, user ID. We do not need the timestamp. Bad AI. Okay. Now if we go back here, can you pull that over for me?
When am I moving over?
The front end browser.
Oh, this one?
The actual code running in the browser.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, now let's give this a try with author, some content, create, failed to fetch. Here in our post model, we say post belongs to the user via the author ID. Okay. A, B, C, D, E, F, create post. And if we inspect and go to the console and pop open the object, the user is null. That is less than ideal, isn't it? So we're going to go beekeeper. We're going to refresh this. We still have the author ID as null. So we're going to go into the post model. Author ID is there. Author ID is user ID here. Login is setting the data user ID. And login is passing the user ID. Okay. Let's try the good old log out and log it back in. Log out. Log in. Is this me or no? You had different credentials. Austin, you probably need a console log on your front end page when we make the API call. Okay. Oh, son of a. Author ID is null. Let's look in your local storage. User ID is indeed there. So when we are posting, we're using the rec.body. The post has the author ID. And when we send in the new post, sneaky little lowercase d. Author ID, user, and the info. So you are good to go. Austin, the console log that you are looking for, if you did not find it, is in Home.js. We did a console log data.posts here, and that's what let us see the user information in the console. Okay, does anyone else need help before we add in some more features here? Don't worry, we got more weeks of full stack coming your way. So we're gonna get more practice with all of this stuff. We like to give you kind of everything that you can do in a full stack project to get started, and then we're gonna practice and practice with this. So just like setting up the backend from scratch felt really tedious when we got started. All of these features feel like overload right now, but you're gonna get practice with them and go, oh, I'm doing a create endpoint, I'm doing a get endpoint, I'm saving this data into the model, the associations start clicking, and hopefully all of that starts coming together. Okay, in our post preview, let's go ahead and modify this. In the author, instead of using the post details.author, I'm going to use the post details.user.first name. I'm going to do a space, and then I'm going to say post details.user.last name. And if I go ahead and save that, we get an error here. And it says, cannot read properties null reading first name. Okay, well, what is that happening on? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw my, I already have a console log post details in here. So I'm going to try and find that. And if I scroll up, I do see in my post preview, maybe not, let me try and refresh this. Okay. Can't prove my point here, but what we should handle here is what happens if the post details does not have a user. And when did we run into that? Well, we've already created some posts here that have no author ID set. So we are probably running into this cannot read properties null reading first name on those posts that don't have an author associated with them. So we have two options. We can fix this in the database, which is the easier thing to do, right? Of just saying, oh, throw user ID 1 in, I wrote all of those. But it's often a good idea to handle those cases right in your front end. So over here, I'm going to say, hey, if there is a post details.author, show this author information. Otherwise, don't show any of that. And if I save that, I should fix the problem. Post details. What is going on? Post preview, line 5. I'm logging out the post details. I'm accessing the user, and then I'm accessing their first and last name. Okay, on this one, the user is null. Ah, sorry, user here. There we go. That fixes it. Okay, so over in post preview, I modified my author information because I made the change to the backend, because my backend is returning the user's information by joining the users table onto the post table. I'm able to access now .user first name and last name. But because there are some posts that don't have users or authors associated with them, I add this. This is kind of like an if statement. It's not a ternary operator, but it's similar to a ternary operator. So what this is doing is it's saying if there is post details user, then show this entire div. But if it hits the user here and goes, there is no user, it will do something called logic short circuiting, and it will not put any of this information out. So this is like an even shortened version of a ternary operator, which is a shortened version of an if statement. So we are now getting our user information rocking and rolling and only showing the author if there is an author there to show. Okay, we got a couple things that we can do here. We can oh, I do want to cover passwords. So we're going to go over password hashing in a second. The read more page does not have edit or delete working yet. I think I'm going to encourage you guys to try and get those working on your own. Compare them back to the messages project. Think about making your endpoint. Think about getting the edit post form to work. Think about loading that form data in when the edit form loads. Try and go through. Delete is certainly the easier one to get working. And then edit is going to be kind of like your stretch goal. So I think I'm going to show you guys password hashing for the last 20-ish minutes of class. And then I will stick around if you guys want to try and get delete or edit working on your own. Does that sound good to everyone? Cool. All right. So on the password, we've already made it a little bit more secure, right? Because our database in our users table is only showing our password. But it would be really nice if we could kind of encrypt that in a way that no one could decrypt it. Well, wait a second. If you can't decrypt it, how do you know the user is typing in the correct password if you don't know what the right password is? Well, there's this one-way encryption algorithm called hashing. And what hashing basically does is it says, when you give me an input, I'm going to create a random string. And every time you give me that input, I will give you the same random string out. Well, what looks to be random. And this creates a layer of security because if you go in and you go, I forgot my password, any secure website will tell you tough shit. No, just kidding. They will tell you, we actually can't tell you what your password is because we store your password in an encrypted format that we can't break. So we can tell you when you are entering the correct password because we take your password, rehash the password, and if the hash matches what we have stored, you then must have entered the right password. But if you have truly forgotten your password, the only thing we can do is reset your password to something new. What we cannot do is tell you what the password is that you entered. So it's kind of like a one-way encryption, except that if we take the same exact thing and do that one-way encryption again, and the two outputs match with each other, we know they must have entered the right password. Let's see that in practice. So I am going to go into my code, and I'm going to modify my login here. And I'm sorry, my seeding here. And instead of passing in not so secure, what I'm going to do is go into my terminal and install a package called bcrypt. And bcrypt is the name of one of these one-way hashing algorithms that we can store our password securely. Asma, we did attendance already. The secret word was seeding. seeding. Okay, so once we npm install our bcrypt, we have to use it. And so what we do is up at the top, we are going to import bcrypt from bcrypt. Then we are going to come down here and say, hey, my password, instead of storing it in plain text, we are going to use bcrypt to hash that password. Then there is a somewhat more complex encryption technique called salting your password. Yes, there's also something called peppering your password because developers love to use puns. But instead of getting in the weeds there, I'm going to just pass in the 10 number. And I'm going to do this with the hash sync function to say, don't run this asynchronously, run this synchronously. Now, if I save and I remember to go turn my server back on, when I start up the database and refresh my table, I still have not so secure in my password. And I'm like, well, what's going on? Well, remember here, we only wanted to create this user if there wasn't an existing user. So what we need to do is come over to our database. I'm going to right click and delete this row. And problem solved, it deleted. So I come over here, I control C in my terminal, I up enter to start it back up. And when I refresh here, I now have this weird looking password in my database. Now, there's no way that looks like not so secure, right? So when anyone comes into this database, even if they stole all of the user information, they would not be able to know what the passwords were unless a user signed in with that exact password. So we have just broken our login, but we have done a one-way encryption, again, called hashing, that has encrypted that password in a way that we cannot decrypt it. Terry, you've got a question, but you don't have it formed in your head yet.
I'm trying to think of like I have a question. I'm just trying to think of it. It's like just give me a second.
Your question may click once you see how the login function changes. So don't.
I got it. I remember my question. So Okay, so you said like the password could be asked when like user like enter it, right? So what if like people like someone try to like hack your account, but like the way they do it is like they send you like a, I think it's called fish, if I'm not mistaken. Like they try to like fish you, like like you click on a link, and then do they still get able to like take your password like that?
Yes,
Or
this does not protect against phishing. So what password hashing protects against is someone accidentally gets access to your entire database, or someone gets access to a backup of your database, or someone gets access to they export a copy of your database, right? They break into your office, they sign into your computer, they export out the database, they email it to themselves, and then they run away screaming, right? That is what this protects against. Because what they're going to do is they're going to open up that export. They're going to open up that users table, and they're going to find this gobbledygook in it. And this alone, they can't say, go decrypt this password. The only thing this password, this hash, is good for is saying, hey, the user just typed in this password. If you hash that typed in password again and compare it to what we have stored in the database, if it's an exact match, they must have entered the same password. What this doesn't protect you against, and something like a password manager would, is phishing. Phishing is, oh, I'm going to send you a link to yahoo's.com instead of yahoo.com. And so you go in and you sign in there, you're still typing in your password in plain text. You're still transmitting that password in plain text. And because of that, hackers can use that information to actually authenticate into your actual website where the security issue would be. Let's see how the login function works. And then if you have follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. So to check the password, we just broke our login. So if I go back to the homepage and I go log out and I log in and I say not so secure and hit login, I get wrong password. And I'm like, no, I know that's my password. That's what I set right here. Well, the problem is our login function has not is just comparing the password that got sent in with the password stored in the database. Well, the password stored in the database is now this encrypted thing. So we have to modify this a little bit. We are going to say, hey, if there's not a matching user, we don't need to do any of this database stuff. Go ahead and return a res.send that says they're not in here. This return alone is enough to stop any of the other code in this endpoint from executing. From there, we are going to say if there is a matching user, we need to check. We need to bcrypt.compare, and we'll do it synchronously, the rec.body.password. In other words, what got sent in with the matching user.password that was stored in the database. And we'll say, is this a valid password? And then we'll say, if it is not a valid password, oops, too many ifs, if it is not a valid password, still send back wrong password. Otherwise, store that information. We haven't gotten into the full authentication flow here. We haven't talked about middleware or authenticating the user on the server. We're kind of cheating and using local storage for that. There's a whole thing with cookies and tokens and all kinds of things that you can get into that I will save for Ryan for next week. But I'm hoping that this is just dipping your toe in the water of understanding not only a full stack authentication flow, but also seeing how we can use password authentic hashing in order to encrypt our passwords and make them more secure. So if this still works, I can now hit login and it takes me in no problem. But if I go back to my home page and log out and log back in with a invalid password, I still get wrong password, no soup. Who are you? Okay, so we modified our login endpoint a little bit. We added in the bcrypt compare. We also modified our creation here to hash the password so that if anyone got access to our database directly or any of the information inside the database, which you could do by accessing backups or exports or something like that, the people who get that data would not be able to get your password out of this because it was stored in a one-way encryption algorithm called a hash or hashing. Okay. Oh, because it's so long. So actually, that's a good point. We'll fix that quickly. So if I go to actually, no, I will do it that way. If I go to the lorem, actually, we'll use the doggo ipsum generator. Last thing I will show you guys. Oh, doggo ipsum's offline. Oh no. How will I get my woof and goody boys? Heroku's really screwed up the internet. All right, we'll try one of these other ones. Pirate Ipsum looks good. All right, so I will say this works. All right, so if I paste that paragraph into the chat, lorem ipsum, by the way, is a actually scientific paragraph that has a representative number of every character in it. So there are not like an inordinate amount of W's in it because W isn't frequently used. But lorem ipsum is basically just placeholder text that allows you to test the layout of printed content and web content to make sure it looks right. So I just posted a bigger paragraph into the chat. If I sign in with my password and I say longer post, obviously in here, this post doesn't look super long, right? Because we have it in a text area. And if I hit create post, now it's fine here, but it's this long thing here. And I'm like, all right, this is probably a little bit longer than what I want to show. So we can solve for that because in the read more, it doesn't look too long in the read more. That I'm not worried about. But in our post preview, we want to be able to shorten that up. The beauty of React is we can do this in like one line of code. All we need to do is go into our post preview, which is what shows on the front end. And inside the content, I can dot substring and limit that sucker to 0, 100. And then I can even say, if the post details dot content dot length is greater than 100, show dot dot dot. So the user knows there's more information about it. So I save, I come in here, I refresh. now my, why do I have an H0? Oh, I missed an ampersand. There we go. Double ampersand here. Sorry. Now we get the ... showing up. We only get the little short part of that. And then if we click read more, we get all of the content showing as expected. Okay, so I am going to say, let's save edit for Monday. We'll go through getting the edit flow working because that will create our create, read, and update flow. Also come in to class on Monday with any ideas that you would like to see in the blog project. Because Tuesday and Wednesday, you've got Ryan coming in, showing you a more secure user authentication flow, and also touching on middleware and all of that good stuff. So bring ideas into class on Monday for extending the blog project. We will finish up my planned content, which is making the edit button work on Monday. Tuesday, Wednesday, you've got Ryan coming in. For the last 30 minutes of class, if you are looking to push yourself, try and make the delete button work. So the delete button is going to need its own endpoint. You're going to need to send the ID information in from the front end. On the front end, after the delete is finished, you're going to want to navigate them back to the home page. You want to probably add in a window.confirm if you're feeling good about yourself. And you need to make the endpoint obviously work on the back end with the correct database query from SQLize. If you are looking for a hint on that, feel free to take a look at the message code from Tuesday night. The message code from Tuesday night, I do believe we handled deleting. If not, it's going to be pretty similar to the edit flow. So I bet you guys can do that in 5 to 15 minutes. I will stick around until there's only 1 or 2 of you left. Push yourselves, try and get that delete flow to work. If you get stuck at any point, feel free to ask questions, raise your hand. Otherwise, I will shut up. Try and get this delete button working. And then edit, and any other ideas you want to see in the blog project on Monday, authentication with Ryan Tuesday, Wednesday. No idea what we're doing Thursday. Thinking way too far ahead on that.
Wait, where you see the delete button at?
I have a delete button in my front end on the read more post. So if you click on read more, you should have a little delete. We'll take care of edit tomorrow because there are a lot of steps on that. If you don't have a delete button in read post.js, I have my delete buttons down here. Did you find them, Terry?
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize it was on mute. No, mine's doing the infinite loading. On my-
Oh, aren't you lucky? All right, share screen. Let's get you fixed out there. All right. Your back end looks fine. Let's. That could be really offensive if I said that to a non-coder, couldn't it? All right, let's try. All right, read ID 3. So your URL is looking right. We do. I'm gonna refresh. I think this is a. Interesting. Okay. In your read post ID, get individual post ID. Let me just make sure your front end read more to Get post to undefined. Get individual post ID D. How is that undefined? Get individual post. Oh, get individual post is also used. No. Get post, get individual ID. Oh, in app, we have to update your read to ID. Okay. Now we got the ID coming in, but your backend is expecting post ID as a plural, and we need to make it a single. Now we have no errors and still have infinite loading. So 2 down, hopefully only 1 more to go in read post. It is still undefined. Get individual posts, return data.post, get lowercase p post. Yahtzee! Joe, there are so many things where I'm just like, oh, that is not appropriate to say out of context. That just came across my Instagram feed. Why UI design should be done by UI designers and not developers.
I just saw one that was my boss told me to make it easier for users to log in. So they added a bunch of different things like, roll a d20 and it'll randomly assign you somebody else's username and password and just log you into their account.
There's a great Tom Scott video on the what if scenario if someone high up at Google like broke authentication and let everyone sign into everyone else's Google account and it's like a doomsday scenario that he talks through and how the world recovers. And then 10 years later, CrowdStrike actually happens, and not quite as bad as letting everyone in, but that scenario of like what happens when you sign into your computer and it's like, no, there's a security vulnerability and just crashes. Um, so anyway, if you're interested in the Tom Scott video, it's really good. If you think you are close but are stuck on getting the ID, make sure your read post route has the ID updated inside of it.
One more time.
If you are having trouble with getting the ID inside of your read post, make sure that your route is updated in app.js to get the ID parameter from it. And in 1 second, I am also going to have the working code in my live share. So if you are stuck and need a reference, you are welcome to look over there in 1 second.
The ID should already be in there because we were using it to pass down.
Yeah, I thought we haven't done it on edit post yet, but you are correct in that it should be already updated in there. Okay. If you are stuck, I encourage you to keep working on it. But if you are stuck in read post, I have updated my delete post method, and in my backend, I've added my server.delete. There is another way of accomplishing that in Sequelize by doing a find and then calling destroy on it. Either method is completely acceptable.
Is there a reason you didn't stick it inside a variable?
Stick
Does it
what
matter?
inside a variable?
the fetch for delete post.
I don't care what the response is from the server there. I just
Oh,
need
'cause you're
to
just-
await for the response to come back, and then I can navigate away from it.
Just because you're not passing it anywhere else.
I'm not passing it. I'm not
Right.
doing anything conditionally. I'm now ideally there would be a try catch in the server, and the server would catch and say you deleted something that doesn't exist or something like that. But in terms of a rough delete flow, you can get pretty simple with it.
Would that be necessary if your button to delete the post was in the post preview?
Mhm.
Like, would you need to do a try catch to validate if the post exists? Because obviously it exists, because you would be able to access the delete button for that post otherwise.
Not necessarily. You could have had that page up for a week and someone else could have
Oh.
deleted it on you. We
Gotcha.
actually ran into some interesting problems. I built a shift system for like signing up for different shifts when they were available. And it was an interesting system because it was based off of like what promotion skills you had. And then you had to be promoted to a certain level in order to be able to sign up for like different spots on it. But it would go live on the website, and I would have buttons that you would click on the number of available spots, and then it would say, are you sure you want to sign up for this shift? It's at this time. Well, it turns out that I wasn't checking at sign up to see if there were still available spots available before I signed the person up for it. People figured out that they could click on the spot button, that would get around the if check to see if spots were still available. Then they could leave that confirmation screen up, come back a day or two later and go, yeah, I want to work that shift. And then all of a sudden we were to have negative available shifts for a particular event. And so that learned my lesson there as a programmer as, hey, before you do something in the database, validate that that's still available. Don't rely on the front end to be the most up to date. Terry, that's a screen sharer. Show, thank you. You need a slash after 3001 instead of a period on your front end. Yep, you got it.
Are we good to go after we got that?
Sure are.
Alrighty, time to go do my Java final project and then final exam.
Have fun.
See you next week.
See you on Monday. Got your delete working. You're all good to head out. Any questions, Austin?
You realize I was the only one left. I'm not. I'm okay. I'm getting it.
Okay, take a look. Share your screen.
I was honestly trying to use a ChatGPT a little bit.
No shame in that. Clearly, every now and then I have to do the same.
Well, I had this before,
Okay.
but I
Let
think I
me.
haven't done anything to the front end yet.
Okay. This is all good in the back end. I don't see any issues with this. So except for okay, yeah, this is all good. This is a little overkill,
Okay.
because like we don't need to do the 200 and the 404 if something didn't work or if there was a problem with it or something like that. But
Yeah.
this is totally fine. So the only thing you need to do over here in the delete is just do an await. And then this has to be async because we are awaiting a fetch.
That's where I was looking for the delete post. Okay.
HTTP localhost 3001 posts, throw in the ID, tell it the
Oh,
method.
sorry, I keep doing that. Sorry about that.
You're good. Method is delete, and then
And then I probably should put delete post back in that. Yeah,
you got it.
sweet.
All right, test that in the browser, make sure it works.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh wait. Nope. Yeah, we're good. Yep. Sweet.
Awesome. Have a great evening. I will see you on Monday.
See ya.